Welcome to the BiggerPockets Business Podcast.
This is show number 1.
Welcome to a real-world MBA from the School of Hard Knocks, where entrepreneurs reveal what it really takes to make it. Whether you're already in business or you're on your way there, this show is for you. This is BiggerPockets Business.
Hey there, everybody. I am Jay Scott. I am your co-host for the BiggerPockets Business Podcast, and I am here with my other co-host, my lovely, amazing, beautiful, smart, and awesome wife, Mrs. Carol Scott.
You are like, what are you digging for there, honey? Do you want something later?
No, I was told I was supposed to be nice to you on this show.
That's a really, really good idea, producers. Good call on that. Anyway, I'm having a really good day, honey. How's your day?
I am doing well. What's going on in your life or our lives?
Our life is ridiculously good right now. Don't mean to be all braggy, but I got to tell you, honey, in the 16 years that we've known each other, there have been few times that are just like this, where there are so many good things all going on at the same time. We're getting ready to sell the house. We're doing a big move to Florida. We're starting another business. We're starting this podcast. It's so much good stuff all at once. A little overwhelming, can't lie, but it's a lot of good transition, and it's a really good time right now.
I absolutely agree. And speaking of transition, we have a really great first episode today. We have a guy named Josh Dorkin. Many of you may know him, and he's someone who's going through a whole bunch of transitions in his life, both personally and professionally. For those of you who don't know Josh is the founder of BiggerPockets.com. BiggerPockets is the #1 online investing resource for real estate investors and real estate investing. And Josh has grown BiggerPockets to a community of nearly 1.5 million people over the last 15 years. But when Josh first started, BiggerPockets was basically just an idea in the back of his mind. He started, like many business owners, trying to figure out how to grow the business, how to scale the business, how to grow his community. And he's here today to tell us about all the struggles, all the trials, all the tribulations that he experienced while trying to grow BiggerPockets into what it is today, a company that has over 30 employees, dozens of contractors. So I am really interested in digging into the show with him and learning about how BiggerPockets started. And honestly, the story is a lot like how a lot of businesses start. So I think our listeners are going to take a whole lot away. So
here are some of the specific things you're going to learn in this show. So Josh is going to tell us what actually sparked that idea in the first place for BiggerPockets. And he's going to give some really solid tips for building an online community. So if you are out there building an online community, he's going to tell you exactly how it's done. And here's something to keep in mind. It doesn't by any stretch happen overnight. You've got to keep that community engaged every step of the way. Now, he's also going to tell us how he took a big, gigantic step back from the company, but that ultimately led to him growing it in ways he never knew were possible in the first place, all right? And one thing you're going to really love, make sure you stick around till the end, because dude quotes Jay-Z. Yep, for real, couldn't make this stuff up. So make sure you listen all the way through. You're going to love it.
That is awesome. Cool. So without any further ado, let's jump into our discussion with Josh. Joshua Dorkin, welcome. You are the first. Wow, I sound like I'm on The Price is Right here. Come on down. You're the first guest on the BiggerPockets Business Podcast.
Josh, I'm excited to be here because Carol's here.
Oh, Josh, it is so good to see you. And thanks for being excited.
Okay, and Jay.
Excited to see you too. Oh, that's so nice. Thanks for coming on our very first show. This is awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Josh,
so good to see you.
It's been a while since we've seen you on that side of the microphone. So I know there are a lot of disappointed people. Not that David Green isn't awesome, but there are a lot of disappointed people who listen to the BiggerPockets Real Estate Podcast that miss your beautiful face. And so you've been gone for
that part, right?
Yeah, you've been gone for a while now. Let's do a little catch up. Where have you been?
Sure. So, as listeners to the BiggerPockets podcast know, I had to step away back in November 17. We had gone through some pretty serious family stuff. My daughter went through had a routine surgery that resulted in lots of complications and required an emergency surgery. afterwards. All in all, the chaos and just, I don't know, being 9 and going through all that is pretty horrifying. And so she developed something called a conversion disorder as a result. And it's kind of like a PTSD response. But in her case, that resulted in her being essentially paralyzed from the neck down. And
so sorry.
Yeah. So, starting end of November, and I think this might be the first time I'm actually publicly talking about what specifically happened here. But after the first surgery, I went to surgery with my kid and things just weren't normal the next day. And so I never went back to work. So that was starting November 27th, 2017. And, for the next months, my job was to care for my daughter. And, she was 9, 60-pound kid. My wife couldn't carry her around and take care of her. I mean, she could, but we had to physically move her around and do things. And so that really became my job of rehabbing her and being there and helping, my wife and being there for my family. So the reason I disappeared from public view was, the first core value of BiggerPockets, which is, family above all else. And so I had to step away. Thank God, call it February, March, we started to see her begin recovering pretty dramatically.
Wow.
Yeah. And, by this, 2 weeks before the end of school, she was actually physically walking into school.
Wow.
I mean, she had gone to school in a wheelchair and walker and all this stuff, but so, and then since then, that was about a year ago. We've been focused on continuing to rehab her, getting the family kind of, back together, really just trying to reacclimate everybody because I've got 2 other kids. But as a result of that, everything we went through, I think any sane human being would reevaluate their priorities. It's just,
certainly.
What's important to me. And
I want to talk all about that because there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, there's your family life, there's your business life, and I know the kinds of stuff that went on in your family life. Looking back, I know I've seen pictures of her on Facebook recently, and she's looking great. She's looking like she's getting healthy again. So there's certainly the bright side of she's recovering, which is fantastic. But there was also a lot of some bright sides in the business and some changes in the business as well that affected you. And I want to get to that, but there are probably some people on this podcast right now that maybe didn't start with BiggerPockets. They may be not familiar with what you've done and the business you've grown, at least not as familiar as some of us are. So if it's okay with you, I'd love to take a few minutes and step back and then kind of build to what specifically happened. Is that good with you?
This is your show, man. I'm not going to hijack it.
Excellent. So
all right, back to the show.
So let's start with, for those who aren't familiar with Joshua Dorkin, Josh Dorkin, who are you? Where'd you come from? And why are you here with us today?
Sure. I think I'm here because of my charming persona.
Absolutely. Without a question, Joshua Dorkin, that is why.
No, I'm here, I believe, because I created BiggerPockets. And to those unfamiliar, BiggerPockets is the greatest collection of real estate investors in the world. I'll rewind and explain really what that means. But about 14 years ago, I'd been floundering around. I was in the entertainment business. I was a failed actor. I failed at a lot of things. I always, failing is good. If you fail, it means you're trying.
That's right. You're taking those risks and willing to make the mistakes and learn from them, right?
Exactly. I went to college in St. Louis at WashU, grew up in New York. Parents were entrepreneurs. And
what did your parents do?
Mom had a retail shop. She was in the fur business. Dad, electrical contractor. So I grew up watching these people, and then aunts and uncles and everyone else was kind of doing their own thing as well.
So you're all in that similar mindset.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you don't have to tell somebody go be an entrepreneur if they grew up in it. I think it becomes almost innate.
Sure.
So post college, I became a stock trader, burnt out pretty quickly on that, became an actor, cause I always wanted to do that as a kid, ended up digging into that business and exploring every component of that business. I was in the casting side. I worked in production, in management, at an agent. I worked on all sides of that business, mostly in crummy roles. But at the very least, I was exploring it and learning it because I wanted to know as much as I could. I think the idea of being the janitor is how you learn a business. You start at the bottom and you work your way up.
Yep.
So I did that. Entertainment brought me out to California. In California, I decided I was going to quit that business because, frankly, there's like this differential between California and New York in the entertainment business, where New Yorkers will, they'll tell you "F you" to your face. In New York, in California, they'll smile to you, and as soon as you turn around, they'll stick a knife in your back.
Now, before you quit the business, I need to mention I'm going to do my absolute best
to dig up all the.
So Josh has and I don't know if other people have seen this, Josh has a clip out there somewhere of him as an extra on Saturday Night Live with Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh yeah.
And so
it's out there.
I'm going to try and dig that up and put that in the show notes. So
putting that in the show.
Everybody check the show notes.
I'm glad you only know about that clip, so you won't dig up the others.
Yeah, I'm on a mission.
So I'm in California. I was in and out of the business, was looking for ways to make some money, knew that back in college I was into real estate and went and got my real estate license. Didn't love it. Didn't love the sales side of the real estate business for lots of reasons, but went through 2 different stints doing that. Just looking for some cash. I ended up getting a substitute teaching credential. And one day I happened to be dating this girl whose family was running a school. Her mom had started the school, and she had worked her way up, my girlfriend at the time. And they needed a substitute teacher. So she knew I had the credential, said, "Hey, you want to come in and work?" And I did. The day I came in, the teacher that I was subbing for quit. And I was dating this girl, so I couldn't say no when she said, "Want a job?"
Wasn't exactly an option. And can I segue real quick? Not even
Sure.
segue, but I just want to point out something that I think is fascinating, that the girlfriend of whom you speak happens to be your wife now, correct?
She is my wife.
Forward. And isn't it an interesting coincidence that her mom, did you say, started this school?
It is.
So Julie comes from an entrepreneurial background too. So that sounds like she gets it, right? So I'm hopeful that we can get into later as we talk more how important that was in supporting this whole entrepreneurial journey.
Oh, I mean, it's insane. She put up with so much garbage. It's not even funny. So yeah, we'll talk about it whenever you have questions.
Didn't mean to digress. Anyway, okay. So you were a substitute teacher.
Substitute teacher now.
Your mother-in-law offers you a job.
Right. Now I'm a full-time teacher. And one day my brother calls me up and he says, "Hey, Josh, I've been buying property and I think you should look at the numbers." And he sent me, the paper, and he emailed me or whatever it was. And I was like, wow, this looks great. Very exciting. I'd always, again, been into real estate, but never had the nerve to do anything. So I got on a plane, flew to where he was in St. Louis, and I started looking at property and, was like, wow, these are really cheap properties, because they were. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to buy some. I had been saving money. So I picked up a couple buildings and I was ready to get rich. I was very excited. I was going to become rich while
overnight.
By
the end of the year, right?
I wasn't overnight, but I don't fall for that baloney. And, I was excited, and I was teaching, and I had these properties, and got managers to help me out. And little by little, problems started to pop up, and I'm 2,000 miles away. And the ability for me to deal with those problems from 2,000 miles away was a serious challenge. And so I found myself in a position where I'm like, what do I do? Hey, some tenant just stole the copper out of a vacant unit, which means they ripped holes in the walls and ripped the pipes and all this stuff out, right? Now what do you do? Right? Well, so you go to the bookstore, and the books don't really talk about that, right? You go online, and well, at least I went online, and I found there were a few communities that existed, but I felt that the business model of those communities was not to necessarily help me be successful, but was to put me into a funnel to buy some kind of expensive materials, courses, boot camps, and webinars and seminars, and all these things that were going to drain my pocket instead of actually helping me out. And so I said, I'm not going to do that. Well, what am I left with? I don't really know any real estate investors other than my brother. He can't necessarily answer my questions. Every agent I talk to doesn't know anything, because most agents don't know anything about real estate investing. So I'm in this position, like, what do I do? Back in college, I had started building websites for fun. Just, the internet was beginning to blossom then. It was the very beginnings of the graphic web when I was a freshman in college in '94. And so I had some experience, and I said, you know what, I'm going to just start to gather as much info as I can online about real estate investing to help me. Started to put together tools, resources. And then I was like, it'd be really cool if I could create some kind of community. So I didn't really know how to program beyond really basic web programming in something called HTML. I was like, I might as well learn. I'll learn everything else I know. So I went and I found some software that I can build out to create a forum. So like an online community.
Sure.
And that was kind of the beginning, that was the origin. I had this cool domain name, BiggerPockets, and, now I had to go and find people to help me answer my questions about real estate. And then I had to figure out how to attract people to stick around, and thus began like the quandary, the dilemma of like, how do I build this business? And
Awesome.
And by the way, it wasn't designed to be a business. It was literally this hobby site on the side to help me stop failing as a real estate investor.
So you had this need, you needed help. You couldn't find anywhere to get it. And this was 2004, is that right? 2004-ish?
Ish, yeah.
4-ish.
Yeah.
So that's before Facebook. That's before there was Instagram clearly wasn't around yet. LinkedIn probably not, right? So what was back then? MySpace probably?
So MySpace was, I don't know if it was at the peak of its hotness, but it within a year or two was, Apex MySpace. Right. A long time ago.
Very much down. So you had this need, you had this idea of building a community at a time when I'm trying to think back to then, and there really weren't that many online communities at the time, right? So I think it's awesome how you were just like, let's charter let's go out there in uncharted territories and go out into these other entities and find ways to build this community. So where you said you went out and talked to other people, found other online resources. What do you recall where you went, how you went about gathering those people to be part of your community?
So the resources were easy. I just Googled did I Google? I don't even know if I was Googling. I might have used like Metacrawler or Dogpile.
Ask Jeeves. Did you use
or Yahoo? No, I never used Ask Jeeves, but I definitely like Metacrawler was like my old school favorite. Wow. That was like, but I found those. That was easy. Getting people to come was the hard part, and I didn't. There was no manual. There was no like. Today there's sites like Pat Flynn and all these entrepreneurial websites to teach you how to build community. Back then there were communities of people who built websites, and a lot of them are still around. SitePoint, Web Pro World. And so I would go to these communities, just learn what other people were doing. And I realized that they allowed you to create, it's called a forum signature. So at the bottom of all your discussion posts, you can, call it a mini blurb, right? And so what I did was I wrote, BiggerPockets real estate investing community, and I put a link. And I noticed, by looking at my statistics, as I posted in these places and asked questions, people would show up to my site. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Well, what if I went to, they all had an area called off topic. So, if you're nerding out on web design, or if you're nerding out on something else in a community, typically there's an off topic where you could just post your random questions, comments. So I would go to the off topics, and I noticed that there were discussions about money and finance and randomly real estate. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I answer these questions, if these people will see my signature and then be enticed to then come and visit my community and participate there. And so I started to do that. Now, there were these other real estate communities, and I never wanted to do that there because I thought it was kind of dirty to do something to poach their people.
Sure.
So I never ever did that. Now, granted, those people came in throngs to do that to us over the years, but I just thought it was bad form. So little by little that worked. That in combination with, maybe there was kind of a fake user or 10 talking to each other in the very, very, very beginning, asking and answer their own questions. Eventually people that were not me.
I think something a lot of people don't realize, if you've never built a community or if you never really thought about communities, there's this thing called network effects. Yep. And network effects is basically until you have some level of critical mass, until you have enough people rating questions and answering questions, you don't get that organic growth. So if you walk into a community, there are 5 other people, you're not going to post anything because you don't expect a good answer. And if there's only 5 other people, you're not going to answer a question because you're wasting your time. And so all communities are either going to get to that critical mass, that tipping point where they're self-sustaining, there are enough people to draw other people and they continue to grow, or they don't get to that point and they shrink and they go away. And so it's real easy. And I've seen a lot of community developers over the years who will start a community, and if in 3 or 5 or 10 months, they don't have critical mass and they're not growing, they just give up. So can you take us through the growth of BiggerPockets? Because I know it wasn't quick. So what was the scale of BiggerPockets growth over time, and what kept you from giving up when it wasn't just taking off in the first 3 months?
Sure. So I'd say it took forever. It was a very long time. I think that first eyeball to the site, that first user that was came independent of me telling my mom and brother to show up, and they laughed at me, or and my friends who also laughed at me. My parents didn't really laugh at me. They just said, "What the hell are you doing? Find a job." I'd say, the first user, the first time somebody posted on the forum that was not me posting questions and was exciting. Right?
Magical. We're like, yes, finally, we got this.
Yeah. And then the first time somebody posted something and somebody else answered it other than me going and researching the answer and answering that question from somebody was also magical. But it took, I'd have to go look back at my notes and if I've even got them, but it took, I'd say on the scale of 2 to 3 years probably before we got to the point where I didn't have to be involved in every conversation for it to continue, maybe even more. I'd say, again, I don't remember when we got our first moderator, but one of our earliest users, a guy named John Holdman, who is a moderator of the community today, 14 years later. Yep.
Awesome.
He fell in love with what we were doing. And what we were doing was special and the reason people came was there was nothing else like it online or off. There was no place where you can go post questions, get answers, and not have somebody sell you something, right? Sure. If you went to, and to this day still, if you go to most communities, you have a question, hey, how does an ARM loan work, which is, an adjustable rate mortgage loan? How does that work? What you're going to get is maybe one or two people answering, and then a lot of people saying, hey, I could get you an ARM loan. I could get you an ARM loan.
That's right.
In other real estate communities, that's just how it worked. So we established a set of rules that a lot of people really didn't like. It pissed people off because nobody else was doing that before. And it angered people who thought they were entitled to do that anywhere they wanted to. And we said, no, you're not. This is how it works here, and do that and you're gone. Now, everyone else was like, holy crap, this is amazing. I can go actually ask my questions and not be afraid that somebody's going to pitch or sell me. And there's no stupid questions. I can ask a question as, quote, dumb as possible, and I'm not going to get made fun of. So we took all these ideas that I had in my mind and said, hey, let's apply this rule set to what BiggerPockets is. And it turned it into something really, really special. And over time, this thing, we got to the network effect point. I didn't have to participate in the forums every day by year 4 or 5.
So wait a second. So you're working, this is 4 or 5 years. And this is a really important point that I think we need to drive home. Anybody that's on Facebook these days, anybody in the marketing community or the real estate community, we're constantly bombarded with the message that if you get up at 3 a.m., if you work hard for 20 hours a day, if you don't have your social life, you don't go out Friday nights, you're going to be rich in 6 or 12 months. And maybe the gurus don't actually say those words, but that's basically the message that they're sending to us, that if you work hard, you're going to get rich quick. And as you saw, that's just BS. We have this generation of budding entrepreneurs who are terrified of working their butts off for 5 or 10 years because they think if they haven't gotten rich in the first 3 or 6 months, they're doing something wrong.
But that's not just their fault. I mean, like at the end of the day, and you said gurus, I mean, that's the venture capitalists.
Absolutely.
That's the angel investors.
Absolutely.
That's the tech media. That's the press. Everybody's pushing this idea that, Facebook and Insta and all these things, like, yeah, they grew from nothing to, mega billion-dollar companies. And if you create a business that, hey, you know what? If I go and create a business that makes $1 million, or if I create a business that creates $100,000 for my family a year, I'm unsuccessful. That's what's happening today. And that's horrifying because I go into rooms with entrepreneurs and I see these people saying, well, I'm going to build $1 billion business. And if they don't, they think of themselves as a failure.
They're disappointed in what they accomplished. It just wasn't enough. Yeah, that is a very, I would say, not a necessarily good shift that's happening.
No, it's bad.
I want to know, Josh, when you—
Sorry to cut you off, Jay.
No, you're good.
Those first 2-3 years, you were teaching as well as being so involved every second of every day when you weren't teaching on BiggerPockets. Is that accurate? Yes. So many? So for those first 2, 3, 4, 5 years, realistically, how many hours a week were you working?
So I quit my job teaching after 2 years.
Okay.
2 years after I started BiggerPockets. I'm
going to interrupt you real quick. Why? What was the tipping point that finally made you say, "Okay, it's time. I'm going to quit"?
I was rich. No, I'm just kidding.
There you go. Boom.
I quit after 2 years. First of all, I was now 4 years into teaching. I taught special ed. I was not just teaching regular high school. I taught special ed. Special ed has the highest burnout rate of any area field of education. It's exhausting, and having 2 people in the same house who do that, it's beyond exhausting.
It's a lot.
So I was ready to go. When I quit after 2 years, I was not making money of even remote consequence. I would have been, I probably would have been, in the lowest category of poverty at that point. So Carol, you mentioned earlier having a supportive spouse. Right around then, I also got married.
Wow.
And my wife was, willing to put up with me making bupkis, really, and supporting us.
Pulling in the income.
She was making the money.
Putting a roof over your head. She's making the.
No, I had bought the house. I had saved enough to do that. I had money in the bank because I learned how to invest in the stock market when I was early, and I always had saved my money. I never spent it on, dumb things. So I had made a lot of money when I was, 18 years old in the market, 17, 18. I had done really well. So, but to the other part of your question, I was working. I would get up in the morning, I'd start working, then we'd leave, we'd go to work. Whenever I had a free period, I was working. Lunch break, I was working. And then when we would get back home, I was working. So I was probably putting in 40, 50-hour days, weeks, concurrent with my 40-hour or so teaching job on BiggerPockets.
So to grow this community, you were working a full-time job in addition to your full-time job.
Correct.
And then after 2 years, you finally quit. And then once you quit your full-time job, did you cut back in your hours? I have a feeling the answer to that is a big resounding no. You probably it was let's go and make this happen, right?
Let's go make it happen. And mind you, I was probably in the first 2 years making, a penny an hour, maybe, or less, when I was working for BiggerPockets. And, that did not drastically change immediately. I mean, it took a long time for that revenue, that income to grow for the platform. And I think part of the problem was this. Again, I said I started as a hobby business, right? As a hobby site. There were various phases of this business. It went from hobby site to lifestyle business, which was kind of when I quit my other job, and now I had this lifestyle business. Now, mind you, I did not have a lifestyle business because I had no life.
No life.
And then I got to the point where I hired my first employee, and it became an actual business. And then the final phase was something that I know we will get to, which was November of last year, where I brought on a partner, and this business is now in full rocket ship mode. But
I want to talk about the first hire a bunch, but before I do, I just want to touch on something that I've always wondered. I've been in part of BiggerPockets. I've been part of the community for over a decade now, and something that has always stuck out.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So if I do my quick math, basically what I get to is you were in this business for about 10,000 hours before you were making enough money to even say, I can quit my job. Maybe even longer before you were making the same amount of money. And you made the early decision to kind of put your personal values that we're not going to have gurus, we're not going to do selling on the sites, we're not going to sell out, above your profit. You made that decision. And it probably would have been, and I know later, like 2010, 2012, 2015, after BiggerPockets really started to explode, it would have been really easy to sell out, to become like any other guru real estate community or any other guru community and just make quick money. But you never did that. So can you talk about some of your, I assume there were daily or weekly or monthly struggles with decisions you had to make between selling out and making a lot of money and sticking true to your values?
So it never crossed my mind to do it.
Really?
At no point did it cross my mind. Now, that's not to say that there was not a struggle. I think the struggle was, where is the line? So what's the black, what's the white, and where's the gray? Because, we have to turn this into a viable business. So how do you make money without crossing any kind of line? Yep. And that was the struggle that I dealt with and we dealt with, and, the company will hopefully forever deal with.
Is that line well defined, or is it like porn? When you see it?
I like that example, Jay.
Best example we can come up with.
And Carol, just so you know, Carol,
seriously, episode 1, and we're talking about porn.
Hey now.
Hey,
Sex sells.
sex sells.
Yeah.
I don't even know what you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So to answer your question.
Yeah. Where were we?
I'd say there's a fuzzy, there is definitively a fuzzy gray, and my rule has always been stay the hell out of the fuzzy gray. Don't cross that line. So yeah, I think the biggest challenge we ever had was the decision to create a book business. And there was this guy that I spoke with who had a book that he wanted to sell, and
sounds like a great guy.
He might have been a pretty cool guy, and actually it was you, really Jay, wasn't it? No. His wife was amazing.
She was awesome.
When we had the conversation, years ago, Jay, about your book, that was the most challenging decision I made in the course of the business, and that was the biggest, like, oh my God, this might be a bad decision. This might be a bad decision. And what we're talking about here is we created a publishing division to BiggerPockets. So BiggerPockets never sold, never sold information, content, knowledge, education, to counter this whole guru world. But then we launched a book business. And the way that we kind of dealt with that was everybody sells books. Books feed your mind. In fact, I've got a book right here that I wrote.
Wow.
Hey, no selling on the show, please.
How about them apples? How to invest in real estate. A great book.
Fabulous. Nice.
But it's good, right? So I'm constantly reading books, books. I don't have an issue with books. Books are inexpensive. Books are approachable. You can get books in a library. I don't have issue with a book, but trying to put me into a funnel to get me to pay hundreds, thousands of dollars for information that's freely available elsewhere, I had an issue with. So that was kind of the tough decision was, hey, this book business. But aside from that, everything else has been very, very black and white.
That's all. So especially when talking about how you kind of integrated the book business, it sounds like you're saying you were really able to continue building the trust of your community, to continue getting people to interact, to continue getting people asking questions, be involved, because you really maintain that consistency of, we're not here to sell you stuff. We're not here to be the high price gurus. So you were able to integrate the books as just kind of a supplement to the business, but not something that's a big upsell. So you just maintain that brand. Would you say that for other people starting businesses, that really is key, or do you think people should be more willing to waver depending upon the situation? Do you have any advice for people who may be in a similar type of situation when they have to make a choice?
Sure. So first, the idea of the business was like, we need to make real estate approachable by anybody. Like, it's like, you shouldn't have to have thousands of dollars available to throw at some get rich quick guy in order to make money. I want somebody working at McDonald's to be able to learn about real estate investing and go out or a teacher to go out and do this. And what we discovered was by making it approachable, we actually helped those very people go out and do it. And there's countless success stories of those people, which is, absolutely mind blowing. And you asked earlier what kept me going in some of those hard times. It was those people and those stories from those people of, hey, Josh, this is amazing. I was, a high school teacher and broke, and now I've got, 4 rental properties and they're supplementing my income, and I'm traveling and doing all these fun things. Or, hey, I was an immigrant that just came to the US. I had 2 pennies in my pocket, and your platform helped me build out a real estate business, and now I'm a multimillionaire. I mean,
you were literally changing people's lives.
Changing people's lives.
Phenomenal. That's huge.
Yeah.
Making better, stronger families. It's just self-perpetuating impact, and that
it's
feel
crazy.
Really, really good. That's phenomenal. Phenomenal.
But to that question, because I didn't answer your question.
Oh, you're fine. I forgot.
Sorry.
Go ahead. They're good. I'm just so loving the whole conversation that, you just.
I'll answer it. So to answer the question, I think there's a difference between values and pivoting on tactics and strategies. I believe that you establish your core values, who you are, what kind of business person you're going to be, what kind of business you want to run, and you stick to that. Core values create culture. Culture creates, by the way, I thought all these words were bullshit. Call it 5-6 years ago. Like, I didn't get it. I didn't understand it until we got to a point of scale where, we've got 20, 30 people working at the company, and all of a sudden, like, chaos and, potentially people who weren't good fits were working at the business. And I'm like, why? So those you cannot, I believe you can't shift from in terms of strategy, tactics, like, hey, we tried this and it's not working. Okay, we're going to change. That's cool. Like, hey, we're going to build out a book business, but it's floundering and failing. Well, hit it from a couple other angles and give it your all. And by the way, today, most people's all is like, I'm going to give it a week or two. And if it's not working, I'm going to quit, or a month or 6 months. I don't think people realize that you got to try. That's not trying. That's baloney. Most people who start a podcast quit after, 5 or 10 shows. They have, 3 listeners and they're done. But guess what? The 11th show is the one where you are actually going to be successful.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear. This show sucks. But the next one, next one's going to be better. And the one after that's going to be even better. And we're going to get some good guests on.
It's time for me to go. Thank you. Anyway, so that's the point. And you guys are going to be amazing by maybe, your 50th or 100th show. Right now, you guys are pretty good.
We're sticking it out.
We just have to make that commitment, right?
Yeah. So anyway.
Okay. So you touched on something. You started talking about culture. You started talking about building teams. I want to jump ahead a little bit. And this is something that I know a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. I've struggled with it. I was there when you were dealing with it, so I know you struggled with it too. And that's making your first big hire. You started the business in 2004. I'm going to kind of do a spoiler here. You didn't make your first big hire till what? I think it was like 2012. And
12 or 13, yeah.
12 or 13. I was there. We were having discussions when you were talking about hiring Brandon. And you were talking about, I have to carve out equity. I need to get somebody really vested in the company, somebody whose goals are aligned with my goals, aligned with the company's goals. And to do that, I have to do more than just pay a salary. I have to give them equity. I have to give them stock. And I remember that was a struggle for you. So can you walk us through a little bit about how you decided it was time to make that hire, the struggle you went through to make that hire, and ultimately how it led to where you are today with 30, 40 employees?
So I would say the struggle was I again, never started this with the intent of building a business, right? It was a hobby. And then the hobby became this lifestyle business. Now, I ended up needing contractors because I was a hack of a coder. And so I needed contractors to help me code by, call it year 2-ish, year and a half-ish, 2-ish. Hired a team of contractors. They sucked. I mean, it was terrible. I was going to build them.
When you say terrible, tell me how terrible.
I mean, I paid I call it 15, 20 grand for this outsourced shop. I was living in LA to build out, when we went from forum to build it into the quote MySpace. Hey man, MySpace was hot. So I was trying to build the MySpace of real estate investing. And, I blew 15, 20 grand on the development of this, and I got back a chunk of code that didn't work.
It didn't work.
It straight up didn't work. No, it was garbage. And I had never worked with a team like that. I didn't know how to, do milestones and make sure that things were working. I just waited till the end and got back a product that was broken, and my money was gone. And I was like, okay.
Wow. So, not a good day.
One of the many bad ones. And that was the day where probably 98% of people would have quit.
Why didn't you quit?
Because as Jay-Z said, I've got only one rule. I will not lose. I don't like losing. I don't like having other people be the cause of my own failure. I can't let you dictate my success or my failure. I'm going to be the only one who's going to dictate my success or failure. So, okay, put your big boy pants on and find another way to do it. Now, I had no money at that time, so I had to go back to zero, start building up, money to be able to do something. And I came in with another strategy, which was, instead of building this massive MySpace-like thing, I'm going to take one tiny piece of it, hire somebody to build that tiny piece, and little by little, piecemeal by piecemeal, we're going to build it up. By the way, there's now a word for that. That's called lean startup.
Yep.
I didn't know what lean startup was. The word didn't exist, but I had no other way to go about doing things.
And what an amazing learning experience, right? I mean, that's what we all talk about as entrepreneurs. We take those things that can be seen as the big failures, and frankly, for whatever it's worth, Jay and I, we talk with our kids about this all the time around the dinner table. We're like, okay, what was your favorite part of your day? What was the best thing that happened today? And most importantly, we really hammer on, and the teachers freak out about this. Like, you say those words to your 8 and 9-year-olds. We're like, yeah, we do. What did you fail at today?
Yeah.
If they can't come up with anything, like, well, you have to go out there and make a mistake and then tell us about it, because it helps you learn so much, right? And try new things and look at new ways of doing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I know there was something else I was supposed to answer in there, but
I want to talk about Brandon. You hired Brandon.
Oh yeah.
I remember that took months because you were struggling. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I had experience with these contractors, and I got to a point where, so the hiring of Brandon came at a very interesting point in the business. You guys have asked a lot about, this long journey. So there were a lot of days in those 8 years where I was just miserable. I was like, why am I doing this? I mean, this is just stupid. I'm not making any money. I had met with VCs. I had gone and met with angel investors, never like, seriously, I'm going to go raise money, but like, hey, is it possible? What can I do? What do you think about this business model? Blah, blah, blah. And throughout it, they're always like, you're crazy. Like, this just is not a viable model for continued success. Maybe there's other ways to go make money. I was watching my friends who graduated from college with me making very good livings, doing very well. And I'm 30 years old, 29, 30, 31, 32. And I'm really struggling. I mean, I'm barely making any money. Barely. What's worse than a teacher's salary? Mine. Yet I'm continuing through it because I see that I'm helping people. I know that in my soul, I know that this thing's going to be successful. I just got to figure it out. And so I got to a point on year 8 where I just, I turned to Julie and I just started bawling. I mean, absolutely bawling. I was miserable. I went 7.5 years without taking a day off. Now, by the way, this is not like, I'm not bragging about this. This was stupid. But I went 7.5 years. I didn't take a day off. When my kids were born, I brought my laptop and I worked. When I traveled to see my family, I took my laptop. I never had a vacation because I worked every single day for 7.5 years, which is very stupid, by the way. Don't ever do that if you're listening. Days off are very important. I felt trapped. So the reason I was bawling and crying to my wife was I was beyond burnt out. I was trapped. I could not escape my business. I became a prisoner to this business. And I didn't know what to do. So I ended up hiring a consultant, a guy I knew in the industry, in real estate industry, who just wicked smart guy. And I hired him and said, hey, look at this business. Tell me, should I quit? Should I just shut it down? Should I sell it? Or should I move forward? And if so, how the hell do I do that? I never wanted to take on debt. I never borrowed money to start the business. I started the business with the $6 it costed me in hosting. That was it. And my sweat equity. I mean, I invested $6 to build, a company of huge magnitude. And that's all it took was just hard work. But So when he came, over the course of a couple of weeks, we looked at the business and broke it down, realized that, I'd kind of gone off the rails, and on certain parts of the business, we had what we call feature bloat, too many features that weren't very successful, and we didn't have the management to kind of handle them because I was the management. We were the management. I always use we when I talk to people about the business. Sure. We was me. That's how I looked big. And I had people who thought we were dozens of people, and it was me. But at year 8, and he said, he's like, Josh, you can do any of the above, but I think given your model, I think this thing has legs. You're now making, after year 8, enough money where you can probably squeeze out somebody. You're gonna have to eat some ramen noodles for a while. And so we went from, we found Brandon, and I was very scared. I didn't, after 8 years doing it by myself, trusting somebody to come in was scary. But we kind of dated. Brandon was writing for BiggerPockets. He was an author on the platform. We became friends, chit-chatted for a while. Then he became a contractor for a little while, and then he became an employee. And he lived across the country. But he and I immediately, began continuing to work 100-hour weeks. But it was like this exciting phase. He got paid very poorly, making up for it now. But he took a risk. He didn't need to work for me was the thing. So I got lucky. I found a guy who was a success story of my platform. BiggerPockets allowed Brandon to become financially independent at the point at which I hired him. So he didn't need a job. He wanted the job. He loved BiggerPockets. And so what better person to bring into your company than somebody who loves
you could ask for, right? Somebody who's so involved, somebody who has made so many connections on this site, somebody who has truly built his livelihood as a result of the hard work you put into your site is the best brand manager you could ever ask for to go out and sing to the masses, come to BiggerPockets, come to BiggerPockets, come to BiggerPockets.
I know a couple other people like that.
Yeah. And let me point out that I think this is actually one of the reasons that BiggerPockets has been so successful. The way you've fostered your relationship with your members. There's this mutual benefit between you, the owner, the site, everybody that's running the site, and the people that are contributing. And there's several members. Brandon's one. I'm certainly one. Who we've literally built our brand and our livelihood and our careers on the back of BiggerPockets. And you don't often see that with other social networks. Sure, people can carve out a little name for themselves in forums or whatever, but literally I can name a half dozen people on the site that have built their brands because of BiggerPockets. And the mutual benefit between the company and its members, I believe, is a large portion of its success. So
I agree.
And you deserve full credit because you've been so giving with allowing your members to come in, and you ask a lot from them and you give a lot back. And it's that synergy, that symbiotic relationship between you and the company and the members that has made both sides tremendously successful.
I agree. Yeah. And by the way, you could think of half dozen. I could think of dozens, and I'm sure there's thousands, which is crazy.
Absolutely.
It's wild. It's wild.
So you brought Brandon on, and it was, when you brought Brandon on, would you say that was one of those moments when the skies kind of opened up and you're like, and there was light at the end of the tunnel, or was it that higher, or was it at another point where you're like, wow, I can really take this somewhere else and maybe contribute a little bit differently and see where this thing can really go?
So it was that higher. Brandon, for me, was that person. And, I look at all the people I've met in my career, you guys included, and Jay, like you're one of the smartest people I've ever met. I mean, you're like absolutely brilliant, and I have more respect for you than I think you'll ever know. And there are a lot of people like you out there that I know. Let's make sure that makes the show notes, please. If I did not hire Brandon, I don't think I don't know that BiggerPockets would be what it is today.
100%.
That's awesome. Major shout out, Brandon.
Yeah. I mean, he's such an amazing compliment to who I am, which is, I think, why it worked. You know, I only wish I had found him when I started, but I wasn't trying to build a business then.
Yep.
So, you know, we just, the two of us would spend countless hours, like, you know, teenage kids on the phone, brainstorming, talking, being creative, and just, you know, chit-chatting about, you know, ideas forever and ever and ever. And which is why we are as successful as we are, because first we did that, then we would actually try the ideas. Half of them would fail. The next one would be successful. We push at it, and then we do the next one, and we keep going. And so he allowed for me to step back a little bit. You know, I went from 100 hours a week every single week to 90 hours a week.
Whoa. You became a major slacker.
I was a slacker.
Spa, you went and got your nails done. You got massages, steam room, the whole nine. That's all.
Oh yeah, it was great. I mean, free time like there's no tomorrow.
Good for you.
It was amazing, and really, I would say that's when the you know, BP went from lifestyle business to a company, right? I would say the next hires, and there were a few of them. There was, you know, Hillary and Allison and Scott. I kind of and Rob. I really kind of lumped those guys in the next phase together.
Right.
That began like this core, you know, small core of a company. But you know, the willingness of people to take a risk on something like BiggerPockets, the willingness for folks to take a risk and work for small companies, not just tech, but like any kind of small company, is not to be understated. You know, my brother's been laid off, I think 4 or 5 times from tech companies. And he keeps going because it's exciting. It's fun. It's new, right? You get something out of the lack of stability at these companies, and some people like it and some people want big stable companies, but I'm very grateful to all those people who were willing to take those risks. But eventually, you know, I'd say Scott Trench, who's CEO of BiggerPockets today, host of the BiggerPockets Money Show, author of Set for Life, and all around amazing guy. He brought something that Brandon didn't bring, which was get a goddamn life, Josh. You know, Brandon is like me, willing to, you know, slave away countless hours for little reward, hoping for future reward. But, you know, Scott, you know, really started, he's the guy who yelled at me to take a day off. Brandon did too, but, you know, actually Brandon made me take my first one, I think over a year or two. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I know. Scott, you know, Scott would repeatedly say to me, this is your money, Josh. Why don't you take some money out of the company? You know, years later when we started to make real money, you know, and I said, no, it's the company's money. And we literally would argue and fight. And he'd say, dude, this is why you've worked for 12 years, 10 years to be successful. And I needed somebody to actually explain that to me, because I felt I was wronging the company by actually withdrawing money and not reinvesting every single penny back in the business.
It's just what you had. That's what you had not been doing for so many years, right? You invested every resource you had. You invested every minute of your time. You invested every penny that you had, all funneled back in. So I would suspect that doing something different just pulled you completely out of that mode that had just worked over and over and over. And although, you know, Scott, and it sounds like Brandon encouraged you to take a day off, and Scott was like, come on, take some time off, which is an awesome thing. Like you said earlier, you don't recommend anyone to work those 90 and 100 hour weeks. It's just not for anybody, right? That said, when Scott came along and you started hiring like the second wave of people to really start ramping things up even more to the next level, how are you feeling personally as the founder of this thing, relinquishing so much of that control and leaving these decisions in the hands of others? And be real, right? I mean, I'm going back to
be real, really?
I know, right? You know what I mean? But yes, like I remember, for example, you know, back in the day when I had to go to a job that wasn't our own business. And when I built out big teams, there were so many things that I missed about the day-to-day being in the business, but I realized that for my team to be successful and to grow our function, that I needed to work on leadership and development. But at the same time, I kind of was bummed that those guys got to do all the cool stuff. So how did your whole thought process work kind of emotionally when you were really, you're so in it every day, every little aspect of it, and then giving some of that up?
So that, it was definitely hard. I think the real challenge came when, I don't know at the very moment that it happened, but there was a point where we got to a point where I was managing, I think it was like 11 people or 12 people or 13 people or something. I was the only one. Like, we need to change this, started learning, hey, you can't manage 13, 15, whatever it was, people successfully, and run the company and,
Right, too much.
So we went and we created this management layer. My dog is playing with a bone, so excuse the noise. So we put in this management layer, and that was very hard for me. That was way harder than handing off part of, hey, customer service to somebody, or blog editing to somebody, or the finances, to somebody. That was actually pretty hard, the finances. But handing that off and creating management was very, 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 very challenging. And I think we did our best at it. I think it took a while for us to get good at it, all of us. And I definitely struggled with it. I would say after that, there was kind of yet another wave of hires where I think we slightly stepped away from our core, which was, at least in a small company, hiring's a huge thing. I'll admit I was an education snob for a while. And so I said, I'm never going to hire anybody who doesn't have, a great degree from a great school. And then I had to kind of shift that because that's hard to do. I found that some of my best hires have actually did not have a college degree when I hired them. We've had a few people who finished those degrees while working for us. But all in all, what I've learned is people who are passionate about your business are going to be your best hires. And I've hired, people from Ivies who turned out to be terrible hires. They were super smart, knew everything. And yes, they were actually very smart. And yes, they knew a lot. However, they didn't know how to work for us. They didn't care about who we were.
I think this, and I know I'm reiterating a lot of points here, but I think this really bears repeating. In the big company world, there are these things in the tech world. They have these employees when companies get to 20 or 30 or 50,000 people, they start hiring these people. In the tech world, they're called evangelists. In the non-tech big company world, they're often called brand ambassadors. People whose job it is to basically go around and be seen, wear the clothes of the company and do good things and kind of make the company look good on a grassroots level. And I see too many companies that they wait till they get to 30 or 50 or 70,000 people before they start really encouraging these employees to be brand ambassadors or evangelists. But BiggerPockets is filled, 30 or 40 people right now, and it's filled with 30 or 40 people who are the company's evangelist, the company's brand ambassador. Everybody in that company is excited to be there. When you see them at conferences, when you see them at seminars, when you talk to them on webinars or whatever, everybody's excited to be part of BiggerPockets. And so when you say that you were just as focused on hiring people that were excited to be part of the company versus having the education, it seems to me that that's even more important. People can learn the job. People can learn the technology. People can learn the business. You can't learn enthusiasm. You can't
Exactly.
learn love of company. And so I realize I just belabored that point a lot, but I think that's part of why BiggerPockets has been so successful, is because you've hired the type of people that are going to make everybody else fall in love with the company.
And that's part of the hiring process. That comes through in the hiring process. Again, we've had some bad hires. We've had some very, very smart people, very talented people,
Yep.
But bad hires, bad matches, didn't agree with who we were, what we were trying to do, created a lot of friction, created very, very challenging times for me. I was extremely unhappy. I did not like leading a team that had those people, and that's bound to happen. But really, those evangelists. But my philosophy, it has always been, I want to hire people, like you said. I want everybody at my company to be the people who are at the conferences, who are capable of leading sessions on the area of expertise that they're in. And I want to encourage them to do that, because frankly, like, a lot of people are afraid to get their people out there. A lot of people are afraid to train their people. What I say is, if I help train you, if I help make you successful, if I help build your personal brand within your own field of expertise, if you go and you decide you're going to leave BiggerPockets, you're going to go and be successful. And you know what? You're going to look back and you're going to say, you know what? That was a great time in my life. That was a great company. And you're still going to recommend us, right? So I think that has worked. I think that's been successful. And for me, there's so many people out there. Why be selfish? Just be good, and good will come back to you. And that's always been kind of how we've run the biz.
That's
awesome.
It clearly has served you very well. And I feel like through all this journey, it's really come full circle, because now we're talking about, you've hired all these great people that really breathe BiggerPockets out of every pore of their body, right? And they're out there recruiting more and more people, building this business over and over. And so it's self-perpetuating to a point where, back to the beginning of the conversation, when this horrible thing happened with your daughter, you were able to take a back seat because you knew that BiggerPockets, this baby you had built from the very first iota of a thought in the back of your mind because of a need that you needed to solve, you know that it's in good hands, and you were able to focus on your family. So it really, it's nice that you built this brand that really focuses on family first, and you hired in such a way that enabled you to put your family first. That's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Major kudos to you.
Okay, so that's a good segue. Let's jump forward a little bit, and we get to 2017. You step away from the business for family reasons, and then your daughter starts to get better, and you chose not to come back. Can you talk us a little bit through what you were thinking there? Like, I think some of us expected, okay, your daughter's getting better. He's going to come back to the BiggerPockets podcast, the real estate podcast. He's going to start running the company day to day again, but you decided not to do that. So what was your thought process? What happened in that time?
Sure. This is that whole Jerry Maguire thing. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. So rewind about, call it 2 years from then. I had talked about the bad hire, the mismatch hires, right? I mean, again, not bad people, good people, just mismatch. It created a lot of tension at the company. It wasn't fun working there for me. I got to a point where I was questioning myself a lot. Do I I know I love the company. I love BiggerPockets, but do I love my job as CEO of a big company? I had talked to a lot of entrepreneurs before, tech guys especially, and gals, and everyone had said, just be aware. There's two phases and two types of people out there. There's startup people, and then there's growth people, right? And scale people, really. And, I was like, you guys are full of it. I don't get it. It's the same thing. What's the difference? So I loved 0 to, call it 8, 10 people. Like, I mean, I love that phase. It was really fun. It was very exciting. Thereafter, I really did start to stop loving that phase of my job. And then scaling and management and dealing with that in management meetings versus like, get your hands dirty and do it. Right. That I did not like as much. Not to say I wasn't good at it. I wasn't great at it. I got better at it. So I started hiring. I hired a coach, worked with a coach. I think he was fantastic, helped me out, learned a lot. We kind of outgrew each other. And then I ended up hiring another coach. And she was fantastic and really helped me think through a lot of things I was dealing with, work through my challenges. Ultimately, I'd say if I were being honest with myself at the time, and I was, particularly with the second coach, I think the first day I sat down with her, I started crying. I mean, like bawling tears. I cry a lot, obviously. With this woman I just met, really. And I was crying because I realized that I was unhappy. And I didn't really want to face it. I didn't want to face it for a while. And this was, after, we had scaled and all this, and I'm like, well, does this make me a bad person? Because like, I love my company, but I don't like what I'm doing necessarily. And we're like, well, let's find a way to make you like what you're doing. And so we tried all this stuff and did all these things. And ultimately, like, I liked what I was doing more and more. By this time, I wasn't working 100-hour weeks. I was working 40, 50 hours a week. I started to take my Wednesdays out of the office instead of being locked in the office. I was now networking on Wednesdays and using that time to think and to plan and strategize. So I was at home or out. And which, by the way, I recommend to everybody. Most business owners don't put enough time in to think about the business. Like, thinking is work. Working is not just doing email and responding and dealing with people. Like, sitting down for an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours a week, 5 hours, whatever, like, that's actual work. Thinking about what you're going to do is work. So I was doing that. I love that time. I love the big picture strategy stuff. But I just was not, I wasn't super happy. So all this trauma happens. And, Scott and Brandon were, along with the other managers, Dave and Rob, were running the business. And I had to be real with myself. I had been away from the day-to-day for a while. I had a lot of time to reevaluate my life. I realized as a human being, I was not happy. And the challenge I faced was I felt like a fraud. I felt like a fraud because my entire existence, my entire job for 13 and a half years up until then was to help other people be successful and find happiness, right? I talked to hundreds of people on the podcast about, if you don't like your job, start figuring out what you're going to do next. And I never had the guts to do that. And so that was where I felt like a fraud. I mean, it was really, really, really difficult. And mind you, I'm dealing with some heavy emotional stuff at the time. I mean, crying every single day, miserable, but like finally was willing to say, what can be worse than this shit I'm going through right now? I mean, like, if I'm going to be brave, look at what my kid's doing, man. I mean, like, now's the time to be brave. I was like, okay, I don't like what I do. I love my company, but I don't like what I do.
It's a big revelation. And it's also, I think, big to just admit it, to like say it in your out loud voice, right? When you're you're like, I just don't like this.
Yeah. And that's not to say that I don't like being CEO. That's not to say I don't like managing people. I think it's a combination of a whole hell of a lot of factors. 14 years is exhausting. I think in that 14 years, I probably I like to say I did 35 and 14. So I probably worked about 35 years in that 14. You know, it was about that time. And so, you know, I chatted with Scott and Brandon and some of the, you know, the other folks who I really, really trusted and said, you know, what's next? You know, how do I transition? How do I get out of this? What do I need to do? And so we went and we hired an investment bank. I interviewed several and hired an investment bank instead of a broker because the business had grown to the size at this point where, you know, you don't just use a business broker. I mean, it was a pretty big business.
Yep. So just to clarify, a broker is somebody that would help you sell the business to somebody else. An investment banker can help you do more complicated scenarios where you don't necessarily sell off the whole business. You can sell part of it and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, we could look at lots of options. There's various possibilities on what you can do, and you don't necessarily limit those options. You kind of present who you are, and then you see who's interested and what they potentially might want to offer to you, right? So we hired a bank. You do what's called a process, and process is another word for a business proctology exam. It's hell. It's really, really hard. And it's particularly hard when you have a 14-year-old business. It's also particularly hard when you're not building a business with the intent of an exit. So if you build a business with the intent of an exit, you're going to do certain things in your administration and your paperwork. You're going to be organized in certain ways, which, by the way, if you've got a business and you're listening or you're thinking of building a business, you need to be as organized as you can with every ounce of paper forever. If you ever intend to sell, because you will need to find every ounce of paper and everything that you've ever built out, emails, you name it, that stuff. You need to know everything about every iota of your business.
This is part of the downside of you never taking outside investment. So you were never accountable to outside investors. Nobody ever asked you to prove the books or to validate every dotted I or crossed T. So this is the first time in 14 years. Basically, you're going back and you're auditing 14 years of your business for the first time.
Well, we had done it before that because we just, you know, I'm anal retentive. I'm Boy Scout, you know, and everything was on the up and up,
sure.
You know. However, it's just like, hey, you know, a process is literally having your lawyers look at a contract that was written 7-10 years ago and saying, hey, is that contract kosher? You know, still, you know, so go through the process. Looked at, had lots of folks interested in the business. You do these things called management meetings where, you know, your management team goes and they present and pitch the business to folks who are interested in the company after going through, you know, I mean, signing non-disclosure. I mean, it's a big, I mean, you could do shows on this whole thing, but we eventually, as part of the process, we met a group. There was a private equity group who expressed interest, and we really, really liked the team. We liked their philosophy. We liked who they were.
For those that are listening that don't know, what is a private equity group?
Private equity group it's a business of folks who invest in businesses, right? Their job is to invest in businesses, and they invest, you know, typically large amounts of money in businesses. And what their intent on a PE deal is typically they want a return on their investment within, typically, call it 5 years. So if they invest, you know, X amount of dollars, they want some kind of return, and, you know, they'll tell you or not tell you what that is, but it's generally several multipliers of what they're investing in a 5-year period. So we did what was called a recap. And a recap, for those people who don't understand, it's a recapitalization of the business. And essentially what it means is they'll go and they'll invest some money in the business, acquire a percentage of the company. And the business will continue onward. They did not buy the entire business. I still own a significant piece of the business. They came in and they are now my partners. So
they're not a real estate company. They're not like looking to define the direction of the business. Your team, the BiggerPockets team, is still kind of driving the business. They're just kind of a silent investor who's saying, hey, just make sure we get our money back and we hold you accountable, but they're not making the day-to-day decisions, are they? So
since I am not in the day-to-day, I can't necessarily answer that question. Okay. What I can say is we picked this team because we felt that they were going to be very, very hands-off. And they were going to let us run the business the way that we wanted to run the business to be run, the future vision that I had for BiggerPockets. Concurrent with that, was the decision for me to officially step down as CEO of BiggerPockets. So Scott, who was acting president at the time, he was president at the time, got promoted to CEO. I stepped down and stepped away 100% from the day-to-day of the business. And my role became as guide and advisor to our management team, as call it the godfather of BiggerPockets, so to speak, and as member of the board. So in our case, it could be any range, basically, with a PE shop. You may have a PE shop who comes in, they're very aggressive and they want to dictate every detail. And then there's others who say, do whatever the hell you want. In our case, they're pretty hands off, and it's great. And, the business is doing fantastic and exceeding expectations, and it's very, very exciting. But that was, we closed in November of 2018.
So it's been about 6 months.
It's been, we're getting there. And that was horrifyingly scary. Very challenging. As much time as I put into my baby, being able to seed control, was frightening. But I knew that the people that I had in place as my management team believed in the company in the same way that I believe in the company, and treat the business the way that I want it treated. So at the end of the day, and found a PE shop, who we've been very happy with, McCarthy Capital out of Omaha, who I believe has the same vision for who we are and what we should be. So I was willing to take a chance because, we had met other people who didn't necessarily have the same beliefs, and they did. So, again, it was very exciting. And thus began the next phase of BiggerPockets, really, which was professionalizing this business, bringing in people who know how to scale a company, who've been there, bring in advisors, and we could now really, it's not like we're a bunch of clowns here. Professionalizing, I use that term, but it's, I don't necessarily know how to describe it. It's like porn, Jay. I know that works for you.
Again, you just can't help yourself.
I'm just using what works for Jay. I know that's what he understands. So I'm trying to be helpful. Wow. So professionalizing and thus has begun the next phase of BiggerPockets. It's very exciting to watch as the company grows, and I'm forever an advocate of this company. I love BiggerPockets. It's my baby, and I want it to be successful, not just because I still am an owner of the business, but because there's very few companies on the planet that are like this company. There's very few businesses that change people's lives legit, and this is one of them. It's amazing. So here we are.
Yeah, and here. I'm just sitting here, and I'm so grateful you are our first guest, because Your whole story, your whole journey is so inspiring. I know BiggerPockets really well. I feel like I know you really well, but to hear it encapsulated like this and to just be taken through your whole entire journey from the very beginning through how you've grown it, how you went through your struggles, how you just kept persisting, and how it's on the trajectory it is now, to hear it directly from you is so inspiring and just so it's amazing. Being on this side of the podcast is cool. And I really think our listeners are going to be as inspired, if not more. It's a phenomenal story. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. What's cool is, I know in my heart, this company is, I believe in my heart at some point down the line, this will be a publicly traded business. I mean, this company, is changing lives, and it's fun to watch.
Huge. So go ahead, honey.
I was just going to say, BiggerPockets has achieved this one metric for success that a lot of times we don't think about. You ran this company on your own for 8 years. Then for 5 years, you had a team of between 1 and 40 people. And then for the last 6 months, you had a private equity firm that came in and is kind of managing it as a big business. And yet from the outside, as a user of BiggerPockets, all I've seen is continuity. When I came along in 2008 to what I'm seeing here in 2019, it's the same company. It's the same site. It's the same quality. It's the same giving back. And so people don't know that for a long time you were a single person business and now you're a big business. And the fact that you can transition, you can make those business transitions without your customers even realizing it's going on behind the scenes, that's an amazing thing. You've really kept true to your original vision, and you've been successful with that vision. And
thank you.
A lot of founders can't say that.
Well, and it's, I think one of the things that allows for that is I never, because of the origins of BiggerPockets being a place where it wasn't about gurus. It wasn't, for a minute there's in the very beginning, personality. I was the face of BP forever, right? We realized that was a risk. I didn't want to just be the face. I wanted other faces. And then Brandon became the face. And he and I were concurrent. He's still a face, face, but you're a face. We want this business to be personality proof. We want this business to be business, Google proof. We want this business to be, recession proof. We're trying to build a business that has legs. So when all this happened, I'm not, it's not about me. I'm not like, hey, like this is happening. And, we put out a release and let it go. The business doesn't change. Who we are doesn't change. We are the exact same company. We just have, different ownership, same management, but different ownership and pretty damn similar philosophy on where we want it to go. So why should anything change? Now, that's a successful transition, I believe, versus
certainly
many businesses where things get upended. And I think there's a lot of reasons that can happen, but I'm grateful that in our case, we've managed to really do it pretty seamlessly.
So what's next for you?
Oh man. Well, I'd say the first bunch of months were really transition months, working with the team on things. And I've really been able to, I'd say over the last couple, to finally maybe take a breath. I still don't think I'm necessarily there. In fact, we just got back from Hawaii, went and visited Brandon, which was fun, the whole family. And I think I had the first moment in, probably decades, where I just sat back, took a breath, and was like, whoa. Like, I truly, I would say maybe even in the last week alone I'm not fully there, but I'm probably as calm as I've been in probably 20, 30 years.
Well, they say you should take a week's vacation for every 2 decades you work. So it sounds like you're doing it.
You're on par.
I'm getting there.
Definitely on par.
That's awesome. Okay. This is great. Honey, do you have anything else?
I just thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being so open. And it's so funny that you recognize that you're more calm than you've been in 20 years, because I can feel that from you. You just are. You've just got this air of, I've got this. I'm like sitting back, I'm watching the joy. I'm enjoying the hard work that I've put in, and it's kind of me time. Your energy has changed. Your energy was great before, but you've just got a different, more calm and confident energy. It's awesome.
Thank you.
It's really nice. Really nice.
And Jay, you did ask, like, kind of what's next. I mean, beyond the just relaxation, trying to figure out happiness. I think one of the things that I'm struggling with right now, which I think a lot of people, it's crazy. Since I started really thinking about this, it's game changing. Like, so last year, because of everything, started thinking about happiness. Like, what is happiness? What does it mean to be happy? Spent a lot of time thinking about it. I think I'm getting closer to that. But also think about like what I like doing. And I've been asking my friends, like, hey, what do you like doing? And what's funny is most of them don't remember. Like,
you forget, you get so caught up in your day to day. 30,
40, you got kids, whatever. Like, what brings you joy? We all stop thinking about that. Not everybody, but I think a majority of people stop thinking about it. And so I want to challenge anyone listening, like take a few minutes and think about it. And if you don't know the answer, you better figure it out, because I'm sitting here sadly and I'm trying to figure it out. I know skiing brings me joy. I know my kids bring me joy, but like, what do I want to do? I just bought a guitar. I was like, hey, I've always wanted to play guitar. So I've been teaching myself guitar. That's pretty fun, actually.
Great.
I'm looking at potentially launching a podcast of my own at some point.
Yes.
We'll see. I'm thinking about it, trying to put it together. I'm looking to potentially advise non-real estate startups. I think I can use a little break from the space for a while. So look to do some advising of startup businesses. That's kind of exciting for me, just the premise of doing that. So I'm just, you and I, Jay, have talked about that. I love that idea. And I'm also potentially, I'm looking at diving back in, because I took a break for so long from real estate itself to focus on BiggerPockets, that I'm potentially looking to kind of dive back into my own investments.
If you're ever looking for some real estate investing resources, I can recommend a few.
Yeah, I think we may have an idea where to find some people who just might be more than happy to help you out. So all kinds of exciting possibilities ahead. It's really cool. So now, Josh, we would like to have you be the answerer of our first edition of what we are calling 4 More. Okay, and this is our version of the famous 4 questions.
4 more.
Every guest every week. Okay, so question number 1, Jay, I want you to ask the first question.
Okay, question number 1 of the 4 more. Josh, what was your worst job ever, and what lessons did you take from it?
Worst job ever had to be, there's 2 that come up. So worst job ever was either I worked at a bagel shop. I did not last a day. I had to go between the freezer and the scalding temperatures of the summer, in and out, and like my body wanted to collapse after like an hour, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm done. Or while living in Los Angeles and needing some cash.
Oh, this is going to be good.
It wasn't porn, Jay. It wasn't porn.
Third time's a charm. It's just waiting for it.
I was a doorman, scrawny old me, for a Church of Scientology meeting.
Whoa!
Nice.
And there happened to be, I was just helping my buddy out, and that day there was an earthquake. So I'm like, standing at the door, and that was the first earthquake I'd ever felt.
At least you're in the doorway.
The windows, all this, I'm outside of a glass building and things are shaking, and like scared the living bejesus out of me. And I like was on the ground and everyone else is looking and laughing at me. And I was like, all right, I can't do this. I'm out of here. So
awesome.
How about that?
That's an awesome answer. So I want to ask, what is the defining moment where you realized you had the entrepreneurial itch?
When I actually, I'd say there were 2 things. I didn't realize it, but when I was like 10 years old in my mom's fur shop, and I was telling her how to run the business. Might have been the first inkling that I was going to be an entrepreneur, or just an asshole. But
that was option number one.
Okay. But I would say, I think I realized it. I really think I realized it at every job that I ever had, where I was never happy just doing my job. I always wanted to give input to the people who were bossing me around, my managers, and tell them how they can better improve the things that they were supposed to be doing as well. And I realized, I'm going to have a hard time working for somebody for the rest of my life. I probably need to work for myself.
Excellent.
Awesome. Okay. So this one goes back to my biggest pet peeve. There's a whole lot of bad advice in business. We all hear bad advice all the time. What's the worst piece of business advice you've ever either been given or you've heard? And how would you correct that if you were to give that advice?
Oh man, that's a really long list. I would say,
we can edit.
It's all about the hustle. It's all about the grind. And don't get me wrong. I believe hustle and grind and working your backside off is necessary. But I also believe that what I did was stupid. Right. And so I took the hustle grind mentality to the extreme. Didn't take time off, didn't, think about myself, didn't take care of myself. And that's a bad thing. So I would say there's balance, and part of the core values of BiggerPockets today are a result of that imbalance. Putting family, if somebody at the company, for example, like the only time you can get things done in a lot of industries is in the middle of the day. Like shops close, things close, right? Like you have to get your car fixed. Go at 11 o'clock and take care of it, and you'll make it up later. Like a lot of companies, you can't go and get your car fixed until 5 o'clock. But at 5 o'clock, you're picking up your kids, you're dealing with dinner, you're dealing with other, it's unreasonable, at least in my mindset. So anyway, just we can do hours and hours and hours of the bad advice that I got or that I've heard. But that's the quickest one that comes.
No, that's
a great one.
Yeah.
So I have the fourth question.
Oh,
I like to spend money. So my last question is, what's something that you've splurged on, but it's been totally, totally worth it?
Man, I'm like the anti-splurge. I'm like, I don't like to spend money on myself. I don't mind spending money on my family or other people. I really don't like to spend money on myself. So, I would say, let's say my Jeep. I got a Jeep. Bought a Jeep, after everything went down. I didn't have a car because the company car was my car. I needed a vehicle. I got this bright orange Jeep. I've been driving the last couple of days until today with our pending blizzard with the top down. It's been a blast. Yeah, that's it.
I think we need a picture of you in your orange Jeep with the top down for the show notes.
Check the show notes.
We'll see.
That'd be super.
I don't know if I want the orange monster out there for everybody to see. She's kind of private.
Okay. And that was the 4 more. And so now I'm going to ask you 4 more.
Let's just call it the big 8.
No. This is for more information.
Oh,
fancy.
Play on words.
You like that? You like that? So
better than porn.
Where can our listeners find out more about you?
Ironically, Carol, we've had countless people tell us they listen to the BiggerPockets podcast while in the shower. I don't want to know what they're doing in there, but where can people learn more about me? Find me on Twitter at Joshua Dorkin. That's probably the best place. I'm on Instagram, Twitter. I'm not on LinkedIn anymore. I may not be on Facebook anymore. We'll see. I'm on there, but barely hanging on. So Twitter is probably the spot. Yeah. That's where
Do
to find.
you want to give a shout out to your book by any chance?
Why? Well, can I give a shout out to my company?
Absolutely.
Have we heard of that?
So I've got this company that I own a piece of. It's called BiggerPockets. It is the greatest place. It's amazing. So really quick, for those of you guys who are listening who don't know what BiggerPockets is, beyond it's a community, it's resources. We've got several podcasts, including this one. We've got a publishing business. If you want to change your life, if you want to better your financial well-being, not just necessarily through real estate, just in general, check out BiggerPockets, listen to the Money Show, check the show out, the BiggerPockets Real Estate Podcast, check out some of our, I don't know what we're at, 16, 17 books on topics from money to real estate. And it will definitely change your life, and get involved, because there's amazing people like Jay and Carol and all the various people who give of themselves to try and give back and help other people be successful.
Okay. And now hold up your most recent book. Thank you.
And this,
there it is.
How to Invest in Real Estate, the ultimate beginner's guide to getting started, written by myself and Brandon Turner, is pretty much like the first book. If you want to buy a book on real estate, this is the first one to pick up. If you want a book on estimating rehab costs, you buy Jay's book. If you want a book on flipping houses, you buy Jay's book. If you want, we got rental property. We got books on every topic in real estate. Check out biggerpockets.com/store if you want to check that out. Otherwise, you guys, I'm so excited for you. This is going to be a lot of fun. You guys are amazing, and this was a great experience.
You are amazing. Thank you so much, Josh. Your story is it's beyond phenomenal, and I've enjoyed every last second. Thank you so much.
Thank
Josh,
you guys.
This was fantastic. We are so glad that your daughter is on
Yes.
the road to recovery, and that you have found new purpose since then. And we wish you good luck with everything you do in the future. I hope you'll come back on show 500 and give us a recap.
Oh man, when I'm even grayer than I am today, sure.
Thanks so much, Josh.
Thank you so much, Josh. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow, what a great episode. I think a lot of us are familiar with BiggerPockets as a real estate investing website, but I think very few of us think about what went into building a company like BiggerPockets. And it's amazing thinking back. Josh started this company 15 years ago. It took him years, nearly a decade, to start getting traction. And just to see what he's built in the last few years, or how he's scaled in the last few years, is just amazing. How did you think about this episode, Carol?
I thought it was just awesome. And I especially thought it was so powerful how he really broke it down to a very personal level and shared so much with us, and talked about the things that he had to do, and taking a step back, realizing he wasn't happy, admitting those things that are really hard to admit, and just in finding a way to move forward and grow the business to what it is today. Just really powerful all around.
Absolutely. I don't think I was expecting the personal story in there, and I think that was pretty touching and great to hear that everything is going well for Josh and his family. Okay, guys. Well, that wraps up this episode. But before you go, we want you to be a guest on this show. And if you want to be a guest on the BiggerPockets Business Podcast, here's what you're going to need to do. I want you to go to biggerpockets.com/bizguest. That's biggerpockets.com/BIZGUEST, BIZ guest, biggerpockets.com/bizguest, and fill out the form there.
Okay, everybody, remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Got it? Subscribe right now. And also, give us a follow on Instagram and Twitter.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. We are Carol and Jay.
Now go share some of your expertise today.